So hello everyone, welcome to our live session today. I will be going over a quick startup presentation to welcome you all and introduce you to our program and the various opportunities you have if you've not previously attended our shadowing sessions. So Pre-Health Shadowing is a student-led, minority-led, women-led nonprofit dedicated to helping prospective healthcare professionals gain access to educational resources no matter their demographic, status, abilities, or location. So my name is Muntaha. I am a team member here at Pre-Health Shadowing and the editor-in-chief. Thank you all for attending today, and let's get started. So just a little PSA, we do have closed captioning for all of our sessions to accommodate all students. This setting can be found on the Zoom screen, on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you need assistance enabling the transcript, please direct message one of our team members. We are looking for ways to become inclusive and ensure that everyone has access to the sessions. So if you have any recommendations on how we can improve, please email us at info@prehealthshadowing.com. So since this is an international program, we want to know where you are all Zooming from today. Please drop in the chat. I'm actually calling from Florida. It's nice that we have so many people from around the world. All right. So if you want to stay in the loop and follow us on social media, we are active on Instagram, TikTok, or if you want to sign up for our email list on our website to never miss a session. Yeah, we do have some wonderful opportunities for you all as benefits for being part of our program. We have partnered with Kaplan to get our students a 10% discount code that can be used on all Kaplan products, as well as free resources such as study guides to help prepare you for standardized tests like the MCAT, NCLEX, or PCLAS. So if you fill out our short survey in the chat, we will get you signed up for these deals for free. We would also like to draw your attention to another amazing program called Neolith. Neolith is an online mental health platform for students, for pre-health professionals especially. We know the path isn't always easy, especially during the pandemic. So we've partnered with Neolith to spread the word and offer free access to their mental health services. So if you use the link in the chat or enter the code PREHEALTH when signing up, you will get access to their services for free. Mask for Mask is also an amazing women-led organization that donates 4 masks for every 4 masks sold. So these go to people in need during the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can think of the homeless community, healthcare workers that don't have the proper PPE, and others who are struggling to stay safe during the pandemic. So with our discount code PHS15, you can get 15% off your order, and you will be donating masks to those in need. If you buy through this method, Pre-Health Shadowing will also get 10% of the proceeds. And it's amazing because we are a nonprofit that runs solely off the support of our community. If you want to play a bigger role in supporting PHS, we would love for you to join our network of student volunteers and team members. You can apply to be part of our administrative team and lead students in various projects, initiatives with professional outreach, grant writing, the editorial team, and the social media team, and so many more projects and initiatives that we have. We understand that as pre-health students, you may not have the time, so we also offer opportunities to volunteer asynchronously, where you can do tasks on your own time and on your own schedule. So we would love to have you be a part of our program and contribute your unique perspective. So if you'd like to join, there are some links in the chat below. If you are a high school student and want to get involved, we have started a program called HTP, which stands for High School Training for PHS, which allows you to connect with college pre-health programs and get involved for fundraising for PHS. You can also organize resources for other high school students interested in medicine. So it's kind of like an introductory kind of club for high school students to get introduced to the health sciences. So if you'd like to join, we have the link in our chat. We do want to recognize the hard work of all of our students in the program. So if you are interested in getting published, you can submit essays, reflections, research papers, and reviews through the link in the chat to have your work on our website. This will look great on CVs, applications, resumes, etc. So please take advantage of this. And since I'm the editor-in-chief, I do look forward to any submissions you might want to hand in the link in the chat. So part of our mission at PHS is to promote diversity. In order to do this, we have launched an initiative to have monthly panels to celebrate different demographics in the field of medicine. So some of these upcoming events include a series on patient experiences, a COVID-19 roundtable, and other international student forums. So if you have a mentor, professor, or professional that has inspired you and you can think they can contribute to these conversations, please nominate them today using the link in the chat. If you can, we humbly ask that you donate to our program. As you know, pre-health shadowing is completely student-run and we are a nonprofit. We are working around the clock to keep this program free and accessible to everyone. So because Zoom and our website are not free, any contribution you can give would be greatly appreciated. If you are not financially able to, we request you send this link to someone else who can, so we can continue to support others who are not able to afford this education or don't have access to because of the pandemic. So throughout the session today, we encourage you to drop any questions you have for the speaker in the chat. Our team members will be making note of these to be asked in the latter half of the session. You can also be asked to unmute at the end of the session if you'd like to ask your questions directly. So do take good notes as our professional is going over their presentation, as there will be a chance to take a post-shadowing assessment to verify your virtual shadowing hours. More information will be available on this at the end of the session, so stay tuned. Lastly, if you can, we ask you to turn your cameras on. This is by no means an obligation as we are respectful of your circumstances, but it does help us feel closer together in a time when social distancing is mandatory. So I appreciate you all for listening, and now I would like to welcome our professional, Dr. Nardia Aldridge. Thank you so much for joining us today. You may share your screen whenever you're ready, or since you wanted to talk without sharing your screen first, you can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and good evening. Is my sound okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Dr. Nardia Aldridge, and just to give you a little background on myself, I was born in Jamaica and I migrated to the US about 30 years ago and lived in New York for the majority of that time. Relocated here to South Florida about almost 5 years now, and it has been a great journey for me. I have been an occupational therapist now for over 18 years. I was one of the privileged one, I would think, to say while I was in high school, I was part of a vocational high school, and part of that program required that you attend and visited with different healthcare professionals, shadowing, you know, as you termed it, to get to know what each one did. And as I went through the different places, I visited with nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, physicians, everyone you could think of. And the one that made the most impact on me was occupational therapy. And you may ask why. One, in my heart, I wanted to be a nurse. I think as we grew up, in most of our lives, you're either encouraged to be a lawyer, a nurse, or a teacher, right? For the most part, no one ever hears about occupational therapy or anything like that. But when I was with the nurses, I found them to be so stressed out, and they would complain that they're doing all the doctor's work and not getting the recognition. And then physical therapy to me was very boring. All they were doing was walking the clients. So I was like, no. But then I saw the occupational therapist, and she was working with a client who had a stroke, and she was teaching him how to hold the spoon and feed himself again. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't know there was a profession for that. I thought if you couldn't feed yourself, someone would just feed you, right? But that wasn't the case. The occupational therapist was trying to help this man regain his independence. And upon further investigation, I learned that was the main goal of the occupational therapist. No matter where you are in your life, you are able to benefit from occupational therapy. So that was how I got introduced to it. However, I didn't go directly into it from high school because I received a scholarship at St. Francis University in psychology. And I was thinking, oh, I have a scholarship, let me go for this. And I knew that occupational therapy involved a lot of mental health as well. So I said, oh, well, it will still get me there. And after one semester of taking all the psychology courses, I realized I did love all of the psychology courses, but I didn't want to be a psychologist. So then I transferred back into an occupational therapy program. Now my bachelor's degree is in occupational therapy. And no, you can no longer get a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy. It is currently a master's degree or an entry-level doctorate. No longer a bachelor's. I believe my class in 03, or maybe the one after me, was the last class to get the bachelor's. And then my master's is in gerontology, because I do love working with the older population, and that's where my heart is. And then I completed my PhD in healthcare administration. I wanted to be able to broaden my horizon and just to have all doors open to me. So just the basic as to how I got introduced to occupational therapy and how things were for me with that. Now, in terms of what does occupational therapy look like? And for me, I primarily worked, as I mentioned, with older adults. I did 16 years in skilled nursing facilities, working with the elderly population. And then I did some time with home care services and a little outpatient, but the majority of the time was in a skilled nursing facility. On a typical day, I would get to the clinic, maybe about 7:30, 8 o'clock. First thing you're doing is you're reviewing your documentation and your chart. You're speaking with the nurses and seeing what may have happened overnight to any of the clients you will be seeing. And after you do that, then you would go and you would work with each of your clients, whether you're working on their basic self-care tasks, are doing some type of therapeutic exercise program or activities, any of those things you would work with them on. And then, of course, you would have time for documentation. You may also be doing evaluation. If you have someone brand new that comes in, you would go through the process of doing evaluations, making recommendations, and so on and so forth. You may also have team meetings, because in the healthcare, the team is important. You're working with a physician, you're working with the physical therapist, you're working with a social worker, you're working with a nurse, the CNAs, the dietitian, everyone. And of course, remember the client or the patient. For occupational therapists, we like to call them clients because we're not always in a medical setting. And that's when you call them a patient if you're in a medical setting. So I call them clients. Your clients is always part of the team, and so is their family members. So you want to make sure they are included in your team and you have your discussions with them. Then your day may also involve some discharge planning for those individuals who may be going home or transitioning to their next level of care in terms of the continuum of care. And I'm not sure if you have been introduced to that, but the continuum of care you typically begins in the emergency room or wherever you go to your primary care physician because something occurred. And then you go through the process of hospital, in acute care, inpatient rehab, skilled nursing facility or short-term rehab, home or outpatient therapy, and then any type of community services that you may need. So that's the basic and typical day for me. However, your day as an occupational therapist may vary if you're working with children in the school system, right? You may be focusing on handwriting or just being able to work on balance and coordination, different things, and that would be a different way as to how your day may flow. And then I know part of one of the things that was asked of me is my definition of occupational therapy. And before I do that, I want to ask, and you could use your reactions or turn on your video and raise your hand, whichever you please. How many of you have heard of occupational therapy before? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up and some hands. Okay, great, good. So at least you heard about it, but the definition may be a little bit fuzzy, right? For me, the definition that I tell everyone is occupational therapy is anything that you have to do or need to do from the minute you open your eyes until the minute you go back to bed. All of that encompasses occupational therapy. Everything you have to do, whether it's getting up, brushing your teeth, all of that, to go, even sleep hygiene. Being able to teach someone the proper things they need to do for sleep hygiene is part of the role of an occupational therapist. So any and everything that you could think of, an occupational therapist is able to help with that. I am going to go ahead now and share my slides for you. And then we will have the opportunity for questions and answer after. Okay, so here we have what is occupational therapy. I'm going to be sharing a short video with you, 2.5 minutes. And yes, we do not just help people with job placement. People think occupation, they think job. So that is not it. Occupation is everything that you need to do in your day-to-day life. And no, we are not physical therapists, okay? It's not the same thing as physical therapy. So I will go ahead now. I have this video on a different link open. Let me get that up for you and share. And please remember, in the meantime, feel free to jot your questions down that you may have for me.
Occupational therapy supports people to engage in meaningful activities, also known as occupations. Occupational therapists focus on making people independent in their daily tasks.
These are all the words that describe our unique profession.
What are occupations?
Occupations are meaningful activities that you do every day. These activities help you to participate in your everyday life. These could include playing music,
Cooking,
I'm sorry. Seems to be some issues with the video. 1 second. Technology will fail you every time. Just give me a minute. We did our test run and it worked, and now it does not want to work. Just give me 1 moment. Sure. With our virtual platforms, these things do happen. Will cooperate, so I'm just going to stop sharing that. And we'll continue with the video. But as I mentioned, you know, occupational occupational therapists, we are working with everyone. And think about from someone from birth.
What is occupational therapy?
Wait,
Occupational therapy supports people to engage in meaningful
I'm just skipping the video altogether. As an occupational therapist, we're working with individuals all the way from birth through death. Even on hospice, we work with clients. So from birth, you may have a baby who's born premature who may need the services of an occupational therapist. For example, my son, he was born at 28 weeks and he needed occupational therapy to help him with his swallowing. And you would think, well, maybe just a speech therapist would work with that. So yes, he was getting speech and language pathology was working with him, but he also needed an occupational therapist in conjunction with the speech therapist. And as he progressed, he had difficulty just picking, think about your ability to pick up the Cheerios. You know, kids, they pick individual Cheerios out of their cereal to eat. He wasn't able to do those things. And an occupational therapist would work with him on that. And then, you know, you progress throughout the cycle to handwriting. He was low tone, so he had difficulty sitting upright. Whenever he sat, he would go into this type of posture. So the occupational therapist would work with him in being upright. Some other things that as they go through, then you have different ages. For teenagers, it could be just helping in terms of skills that's needed, life skills that you may need to develop. And the therapist will work with you with that, or maybe some social skills or challenges that you may have as a student, right? If you need accommodation services, that could be something an occupational therapist may work with you on. If you're having any challenges with driving, low vision, all those areas, you would have an occupational therapist work with you. And as I mentioned, we have occupational therapists that work with clients on hospice. But at that point, we're not looking to regain strength, endurance, balance, any of those things. We're looking at more quality of life. What type of legacy do you want to leave with your family members? Is it that you just want to be able to go and look through the window? Something as simple as that. They're laying in their room. They may not be able to see through their window or see the sunlight. An occupational therapist may help them with positioning, being able to sit upright so they could enjoy those last few days of their lives. So that's something to consider. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint again for you. And I will have the PowerPoint made available this way. If you need it, you will be able to have access to it and hopefully be able to watch the videos after. Let me move our links out the way. So I already told you my definition of occupational therapy. Anything you want to do from the moment you open your eyes to the time you close them at night. That's my simple definition. But the American Occupational Therapy Association, they define it as that occupational therapists help people across the lifespan, as I mentioned, to participate in the things they want and need to do through the therapeutic use of everyday activities. And what they mean by that is that anything that you're engaged in, for example, I mentioned the Cheerios, my son having some difficulty being able to pick up something as simple as the Cheerios, right? So my whole session as the occupational therapist would be focused on him being able to pick up different type of things that would require that same type of grasp, right? Well, and that eventually those same Cheerios, being able to pick up the Cheerios lead to you being able to hold a pencil or a pen. And that's what an occupational therapist think about. How is this going to translate later into the life of this individual and what they will need to do or have to do as they move through their life? Now, what are some basic things that you need to think about for occupational therapists? And I put this website here, AOTA.org, because you can go on their site and get tons and tons of information, whether it's about the different schools that offer occupational therapy programs, the degrees you need, or just the different skills. All of that is right here at this site. But some things I wanted to highlight is that it says you're able to help children with disabilities to participate in school, as well as social situations. We help individuals recover from any type of injury to regain the skills. I mentioned that client who had a stroke, who needed to be able to feed himself. I had a client who, while giving birth, she had a stroke. And then now as an occupational therapist, I had to teach her how to feed her baby, how to breastfeed and care for her baby using one-handed techniques, right? So these are simple things that you have to consider. And then provide support for older adults who may be experiencing some physical or cognitive changes as they age. What we do, we are able to do evaluations in clients' homes. If you're home and you're having difficulties, maybe the toilet is too low, maybe there's no grab bars, maybe in the shower they can't stand, they need to sit. So we would recommend tub bench, shower chair, all these different things to make sure that we can adapt their home, work, or school environment to ensure that they are as independent as possible. That's always the goal, is to make sure they're able to return to the highest level of independence possible. And then, as I mentioned, you never leave out the caregiver or the client. You want to be able to provide guidance and education to the family members, because no matter what's going on with your client or your patient, their family members are always affected, and you are not only treating that one person, you're treating their family as well. And then we believe in a holistic perspective. What this means is that as occupational therapists, we're not just looking at the physical limitations. We're looking at mental health. We're looking at their emotional health. We're looking at their social health as well. So everything, the psychosocial, the physical, everything, we are able to see the big picture with all our clients, whereas certain disciplines just focus on one area. Occupational therapists, we are very holistic and look at how everything that they're doing affect them in some way, shape, or form. Now, you may wonder, well, what are some prerequisites that I should be thinking about or looking into, whether you're in high school or even now going into your undergrad, what are the focus that you should look at? Biology is a major one. And a lot of people that I've met who have come into the occupational therapy program at Nova Southeastern University, they either have a major or minor in biology, psychology, or kinesiology. Those are the top three that I typically see from them, but psychology is a big one, and biology. So you need biology, you need anatomy and physiology, and you will still get anatomy and physiology when you get into the occupational therapy program, but you do need it as a prerequisites as well. You do need physics, and you need English, as well as you need to pass the GRE. Okay, so make sure you have that as well. Then there may be other things that you have to consider, such as the humanities, and those are, of course, any type of arts, communication, foreign language, things of the sort. I already mentioned psychology. You have to do, I would say maybe about 3 at least psychology courses, and some of them is listed here, human growth and development, and it's not listed here, but I know we also had to do abnormal psych. So those are some of the things you want to think about. And then of course, the social sciences, statistics, and medical terminology for college students. So these are some of the prerequisites that as you're thinking and wondering what should you be majoring in, or what are some courses you need to take, these are the highlights. Some other things that I didn't list on it would be that you want to think about public speaking. If you're looking at some additional courses, public speaking would help. Any course on ethics or philosophy, those type of courses also help, because it just help to give you a good framework and help you to become a more holistic student going into the occupational therapy program. So at Nova Southeastern University specifically, we offer 3 different programs for occupational therapy. One is our Masters of Occupational Therapy program. This is the entry-level degree that's needed for practice. Earlier, you heard that I said that I had a bachelor's in occupational therapy. That no longer exists. It was replaced by the Masters of Occupational Therapy, but there is also an entry-level doctorate program, which takes a little bit longer, maybe about a year more. So if you wanted to add a year, year and a half to your coursework, you can do the entry-level doctorate. And we have this Masters of Occupational Therapy program is specific to the Fort Lauderdale campus. The Tampa Bay campus, they have the entry-level doctorate, but the Masters at the Fort Lauderdale campus is going to be changing, I believe, in 2022, that fall. So we will, both campus will have entry-level doctorate. So if you want a master's degree, you would have to get in ASAP, because soon it will be changing to that entry-level doctorate. But of course, there are other schools throughout the US that will provide a master's degree. Then there are post-professional degrees, and this means that you've already had an occupational therapy degree and you want to go on, and this is when you have a post-professional doctorate or a PhD in occupational therapy. So you are able to move up and continue on your journey with your occupational therapy career. Now, what are some things that happen in the year of an occupational therapy student? During your first year in the summer, you will be taking anatomy. There's introduction to occupation, right? We now know occupation is not just a job, it's everything that you need to do. Those are occupations. So you'll get an introduction to that. You'll have fieldwork issues 1, and that basically introduces you to occupational therapy in the field. It may be where you're doing simulated cases, or you may actually go out. Because of COVID, we had to stop going out, of course, and we use more simulations as well as videos for that course. And then you would also take physiology. In the fall semester, you would take kines. You would have foundations for occupational therapy practice. We have a course called Occupational Analysis, which just teaches you how an occupational therapy thinks and how to break down different tasks. And then the conditions, the impact of human conditions on occupational performance, which just talk to you about the different conditions such as diabetes, different type of diagnosis, and how they may impact on an individual. Then in that winter, so at Nova, we call it winter. I know many universities may call it spring, but we call it the winter. Fall typically is usually August, and then winter starts in January. And you're taking neuro, anatomy, human interactions, part 2 of human conditions, and then research methods, okay? And then in your second year, you're taking summertime again, you're taking the mental health courses. So when you think about psychology, this is where that comes into play. You're taking the mental health, the practice course, which you're getting the didactics, as well as you're getting the practicum, which is you being able to apply some of the skills that you have. And then you're learning about the impact of environment on occupational performance. So how does one's environment affect how they live in different contexts? Then the following fall, you're doing practice classes with the pediatric and teenagers. That's what the focus is. At that time, you're taking a course called Professionalism and Management that tells you all about the management skills and everything that may be needed as an occupational therapist. For example, before I left New York, I was the director of rehab at my skilled nursing facility. So yeah, I went in as an occupational therapist and I was a supervisor. And then I left as the director of rehab, where I was supervising not only OT, but physical therapists, speech language pathologists, as well as the audiologists. So you learn a little bit about that. And then we have what's called the research development seminar, where you're able to work alongside a professor on a particular research topic. For example, this past fall, I started with my student and we did a research on how Black occupational therapy students are educated on systemic racism, or prepared to deal with systemic racism when they enter the workforce or in their program. And the reason why we decided to go on that topic is because only 3% of therapists in the profession is Black. The majority is 87% white. So because of that, I wanted to know, since we have this issue with that diversity, how do we ensure that, since it's only 3%, how are those students able to be successful in their program and then go into the workforce as a minority? And then here we have again, then after the fall, you have your winter session where you're either taking, so here where it says fall, and I mentioned that you were doing the pediatric and the adolescent, the cohort is split into two. So half will do peds and the second half will do adults. And then in the winter, you will switch. The half that was doing the pediatric content will now switch over and do the adult content, and vice versa. And then you will have your field work. Once you're finished with that, you will start your field work, where you are actually going out into the field for 3 months. You will get two 12-week rotations where you will go into a setting and be able to practice during that time. And we will talk a little bit about that in a minute. So this is the third year when they're able to go into your field work. So typically it begins in May. You would have finished all your didactics, all the coursework by May, and then you would go to your field work. Your field work, and I'm just gonna do all of this right here so we could get some of this stuff. Your field work could be in a hospital, it could be in a nursing home, it could be in a school, it could be at a community center that has an occupational therapist, it could be a hand clinic where you're working with a PhD. So any range as to different places occupational therapists work, your field work may be at those sites. We typically have commencement in August. At that time, you have not finished the field work necessarily, because you would have only done the first 3 months, and then you would do the second 3 months, September through November, and be finished around November or December when your degree is conferred. So although you may walk across the stage in August, you still may have more time at field work. Something I'm looking to change, because I like to know that when you're done and you march, you walk across the stage and you could celebrate. Unfortunately, currently, that's not the way things are, but we shall see. And once you're finished with all your field work, we have a national board certification, which is done online, but you have to go to a specific place to take the board. So it's not done at your home. You have to go to a center, sit, and take your board's exam. It's 4 hours, 200 questions that you have to do. The great thing about this board exam, as you see here, it says a national board exam. It applies to any state. When I left New York and I relocated to Florida, I didn't need to take my boards again. All I needed to do was send Florida Board of Licensure their money for a Florida license, and that was it. And I took some additional continuing education course just to learn about the Florida rules and laws as it pertains to practicing occupational therapy, but that's it. So any of the states you go to, you can use your occupational therapy certification exam and practice. You do not ever have to take it again, which is a good thing and a big positive for us. Not all profession is able to do that. So I think that's good. And you want to, once you pass your boards, you apply for your state licensure and you're able to get licensed. You can be licensed in multiple states, which is good. For example, I am still licensed in New York. If you wanted to be licensed in as many as you want is good. Once you get that state licensure, though, if you should ever get that, I recommend you keep it active, even if you're not living there, because reapplying for it is a little bit more difficult and it takes a long time. So once you get it, just reapply, even if you're not using it, because you never know when, who knows? You may go on vacation to another state and decide, oh, let me try out a place at a site if they have a job for just the weekend as PRN and see if I like it here, and you will be able to practice. And here, once you get your license, you can practice as an occupational therapist. So OTRL. OT, of course, means occupational therapist. The R means you're registered. That meant you took the boards, you passed, and then the L. The R, after you pass your boards, every 3 years, you need to do a recertification with the National Board of Occupational Therapists, and you just send them and you tell them it's for them to see that you're keeping up to date with all your continuing education course, that you're current on what's going on in your profession. That's what the R means. And then the L means that you're licensed. So if you see someone without the R, it just meant that they have not renewed through that board certification organization in saying that they're keeping up with their continuing ed. However, they must have the L, because the L is saying that you're licensed in that state, and that state also have their own requirements for continuing education. So now how do you apply here? As you see, it's on a rolling basis. So whenever you're ready, just get the application in, and typically you want to get it in before March, but they do have that rolling admission. And then orientation typically begins in May. So between March and May, you're being notified as to whether or not you got in, and then what the process would be. How do you do this? First, you want to complete the OTCAS application. You go on there, it has everything. And I believe with this, you can apply to multiple schools. So this, of course, is the best thing for you to do. You get that in, you need your transcripts, you need a minimum of 40 hours, which I hear some of this is applying to, and it could be some virtual or it could be written. And then you have to do a written essay. You will also have to do a video essay if you're invited to, but typically I've seen a lot. And what this allows for, and what I like about it, is that sometimes students may have a difficult time expressing themselves in writing. But when we do the video essay, then your personality comes out, and although we are not interviewing you one-on-one, we're able to learn a little bit more about you through your video, and it may be easier to express yourself. Or it could be vice versa. It could be that, oh my goodness, I am so shy, I do not come across very well on video, but the written essay will say much more about me. So we're able to look at multiple points to be able to see how you did. Then you need to complete and upload the GRE results. Sometimes they're able to waive the GRE information. And I believe some schools, they have a minimum requirement. Nova, they're not waiving the results, but there's no minimum, I believe, for you to pass it. So you're able to get in no matter the score. You could score low, but if everything else is good, then it's very likely that you would be able to get into the program. And there's a non-refundable fee of $50 that's typically required for admissions. And we have a link here, and at any point, just visit nova.edu, type in the Masters of Occupational Therapy program, and they have a lot of information there for you to get. So here are some other things I mentioned, the GRE, it says preferred, but as I mentioned, if you didn't get it, but you have other things, other areas where you're strong, you will be able to make it okay. 3.0 or better is what we're looking for in terms of in terms of your GPA, and making sure that you have those prerequisites, as I mentioned, right? And of course, the volunteer hours. Now about the volunteer hours, I know right now because of COVID it's hard to get them, but if you're able to get any, try to diversify where you're doing the hours. So see if you could get something in a hand clinic. See if you could get something in a skilled nursing facility. See if you're able to get something in a school setting or a setting where they're working with children. This way you get a good idea as to what an occupational therapist does, and it will make you a more solid candidate, because it's not like, oh, well, I think it's fun, it looks interesting. No, you are going to be able to say, I shadowed in an outpatient clinic, I shadowed, someone in a school setting, I shadowed in a nursing home, and I was able to see how the occupational therapists work in these various settings. And then I have contact information here for, like I mentioned, if you wanted to see more information on the program itself, and the contact information for admissions, and then our program director, Dr. Lori, if you wanted to speak with her directly. One great thing that Nova does that I like is we have what's called a backstage pass. And even during COVID, we were able to do it, where you was able to come and visit and sit in a class. A lot of times students sit in on my class and just hear and see, well, one, you're able to see how many students are in the class and how the professors teach, and is it engaging, and how do you feel about that? And we were able to do that virtually as well as in our face-to-face platform. So if you ever get an opportunity to do the backstage pass, I highly recommend that. Okay, and then I'm going to stop share now and be open to questions, or if there's anything else you would like for me to elaborate on, I will be more than happy to do so.
Thank you for that amazing presentation. We found it very informative, especially myself, so thank you for that. So moving on to questions, Khadija wants to know, do you feel like occupational therapy has helped further your understanding with public health services?
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, and public health, I think, is a big thing. Even right now, we're trying to, as we move to the entry-level doctorate, to combine that public health aspect into occupational therapy, or to make it a joint, a dual degree where you're able to get occupational therapy as well as your public health degree, because it does make a big difference. One of the major things I have noticed is that sometimes people don't look in terms of occupational justice or just social justices in general, and that's where you have to worry about the public health. So occupational therapists, because we're so holistic, we're able to look at all those different perspectives and look at all the different things that's hampering or preventing someone from being able to be as independent as possible. For example, one of the things, and I'm going to use school, even though the children are not where my heart and passion is, as I mentioned, I'm more with the older adults. We have students, you have the children, and they come in, and sometimes the therapist or someone else may complain that this kid is misbehaving or not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they don't know about what's going on at home, that this kid may not have had breakfast because there's no food at home, right? Or all they had was a glass of milk and there was no food, it was only milk, and how that may affect their behavior and their ability to participate and engage in school and class. So that would directly relate to a public health issue. Part of what we do, and I've taken students every year, minus this year, of course, to Jamaica. We go on a medical outreach trip to Jamaica, and we spend 1 week in Jamaica, and we go to the underserved communities, and they're able to see not only a different culture, but just that there's a need, no matter where you are or how great the place may seem, there's always a need for healthcare professionals, but also to teach them how to deal with clients of different cultures. Because as I mentioned earlier, my profession, occupational therapy, is not very diverse. As much as I would like to be able to sell it as being diverse, it is not. I already mentioned it is 87% white female, only 9% male in the profession. So that's a whole nother aspect. So if there are any males on here, perfect profession to go into to try to get those numbers up. Only 9% male in the profession, 3% Black, and same thing about 3.5, 3.7% Hispanics as well. So they're able to go, but the clients that you're seeing are very diverse. So you need to be and I say not culturally competent, because competency cannot be achieved with culture. You need to have cultural humility, right? You need to know that you don't know everything and allow your clients and your patients to teach you about their culture and what their needs are. So yes, public health is major. It's a very important aspect, and it goes hand in hand with occupational therapy. Thank you for that question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. Another audience member is asking, can you describe the mental health aspects of having an injury and not being able to be independent, and some patients having to work for months and months to regain that independency they've been used to their entire life? What is the mental health looking like after injury?
Oh yes. So after injury, mental health is major, and depression is huge, and it's something and this is why I mentioned as OTs, you have to be keen on that. So a lot of times you go in and you're bubbly and you're ready to get the client up and to get them to do stuff, and no, I've just lost my leg, I've just had my arm, I've just had a full body burn, I do not want to get up, I have no reason to go on or to live and all this. And you as the occupational therapist have to now change how you think and your approach. And sometimes I've spent my whole session just listening to a client, just having them talk about what they're going through, if they're even able to talk, because sometimes we haven't gotten to that point yet where they could talk, right? So it takes time to establish rapport and to develop that relationship. But mental health, you always need to make sure you're connecting with your clients right away. Always see how they're doing, what's going on in their life. And if it takes 15 minutes out of your session to be able to talk about that, that may be more valuable to them than the exercise that you're going to give them or the activity that you're trying to work on. Sometimes I've gone up and, mental health, people don't think in, self-care, basic ADLs, activities of daily living, and your self-care task is very important. Think about if any of you have ever been in the hospital for more than a day, if it's been 2 or 3 days, did you get a shower or an opportunity to shower? No. Maybe you got to brush your teeth, right? Because they just leave you in there, they're coming and going, and maybe you got to brush your teeth. Now imagine an older client or someone who's not able to move or to do anything, and when they were in the hospital 3-4 weeks, no shower, didn't get a chance to brush their teeth and everything. And then you walk in the room now and trying to get them to do some exercise and something. No. And this is why I love occupational therapy, because I can walk into the room and say, hey, how are you doing? When was the last time you was able to get out of bed, brush your teeth and stuff? And they will be more than happy to get up with me and for me to help them to the shower or the bathroom, get them to brush their teeth, comb their hair. And you will think about when you are dying for a good shower and you got that shower, it changes your mental health. It changes how you're feeling and then give you the motivation and inspiration to move on. So it depends on what's going on with the client, but you always have to know and go in with that mind frame thinking, and I call it universal precautions for mental health. Go in thinking that this person has, knowing that they've experienced a traumatic event and that they may not be up to doing anything, and that you're going to have to try your hardest to meet them where they are and be able to communicate and get them to where they need to be, because they may see no hope. You're going to have to be that ray of hope and ray of sunshine for them to help them to get them to where they need to be, because it's not going to be there sometimes. You're going to have to come in with that positive attitude and be able to get them from point A to point B, because they can't see point B. They're thinking their life is over, there's nothing. And this is why we call it an occupational profile. And this is you talking to the client. This is you talking to the caregivers, family members, to find out more about them. This way, you can use what you've gained from that to help them to get to where they need to be. Same thing for someone who's in a coma. As an occupational therapist, I've worked with clients in a coma. And you're thinking, well, what would you do with someone that's comatose? It's called coma stimulation. It's being able to get them aroused again, arouse all 5 senses. So if you're someone who used to love walks on the beach and love the scent of coffee and things, yeah, I'm gonna have my little toolkit and I'm gonna have some sand in it. I may play some music with sounds of the ocean on it. I may, have some coffee bean scent that I bring into the room. And that's part of my therapy session, is to be able to bring all those senses back for you using those common things that I know from either speaking to the family members or reading your chart. These were part of your lifestyle. I hope that helped, that answered that question.
That definitely answered the question, and thank you for the little insight about the coma patients. I did not know that.
Oh, yes.
Lena asks a question. If it's not too personal, just let us know. But she wants to know how occupational therapy has helped your son, and if you can describe the recovery process with you as a parent.
Okay, so number one, when I had my son, I was already an occupational therapist, and everybody was saying, but you're an occupational therapist, why don't you do all the things? When you're emotionally involved in a case, you're not able to perform. So I could, as his mom, I could not be his therapist. And of course that would be against, they call it for medical, for the doctors, right? The Hippocratic Oath and things like that, or making sure you're not treating your family members, but I just couldn't do it. Did I have the skill set? Yes. Could I do it? No, because my heart would break. And my parent instinct kicked in. So for example, when the occupational therapist was working with him and he would be crying and screaming, as his mom, I just wanted to take him and hold him and tell him to go and leave him, let him be. But I knew that I couldn't do that. So emotionally, it was difficult for me. But if you saw him today, he's now 14 years old. He's big. You would not have thought that he was a preemie. He was able to gain all his skills back and everything. I was able to, he got therapy from he was born, from the minute he was in the NICU, all the way up until he was going to enter kindergarten. And I pushed and I had to advocate. And that's the other thing, whether you're a therapist or a student or a parent, whoever it is, you have to advocate. But as occupational therapists, part of our intervention is advocacy. And it's self-advocacy, as well as teaching your client, is advocating for your clients, as well as teaching them self-advocacy. And if I wasn't aware of the benefits of occupational therapy, my son would not have received occupational, physical, and speech therapy. They would have probably only given him one of the services. But because I was knowledgeable enough, I was able to advocate and to keep pushing for him to get those services. So yes, he is now 14 years old, 14 and in the 10th grade. Very smart, very smart, very intelligent, about to start the 11th grade in August, which will be his birthday. So he'll be turning 15 right as soon as he starts school for his birthday. And he's big and bulky and everything, tall. You wouldn't have think he was a preemie. When he was born, he was 3 pounds. I was like, oh my God, he looks like a little rat. But he was, he came out, the doctors did pump me up with steroids. So they were anticipating him being a preemie, because what happened that led to that was I had cervical dysplasia, and it was like precancer and in my cervix. And because of that, they had to do a cone biopsy and remove most of my cervix. So every time my body would think I'm going into labor, and I would go into preterm labor each time. So at 28 weeks, I went into full-blown labor and I had him, but he came out crying and was fine. He was just delayed and he had a lot of GI issues. And he was low tone when he walked. And even now, that part didn't get back 100%. He dragged his right leg a little bit, and he still drags that a little, but everything else has been fine. Handwriting, eating. He still has a lot of sensory issues where texture bothers him. For example, it's now at age 14 that he's finally able to walk on the sand. He's not able to walk on sand, bare feet, or if he touches the skin, it irritates him. He still needs to rock. He needs to rock in order to calm himself down and to be able to focus. And so all of those things contribute from him being a premature baby. But yes, thank you for the question and for your concern. He has come a long way, thank God, and he is doing phenomenal. So I can definitely speak and be thankful for those pediatric therapists that saw him over the years.
Yeah, we are all very happy that he's turned out well and you've recovered from your illness. So Goodness asks, do you have any advice on how to identify if a potential employer is showing racism or bias towards a minority? She wants to know specifically for Black people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's what we call implicit bias, right? And implicit bias, when you think about implicit bias, you have microaggressions and microaggressions is divided into different, different things and different ways it comes across. Now, you have to be careful, and I'm going to give you some examples, and then you have to see, this is where that implicit bias come across and where you have to decide for yourself as an individual, is this discrimination, is this racism, or is it just me overreacting? And a lot of times, unfortunately, as people of color, or in your case that you ask, as a Black person, as a Black woman, you may think I'm overreacting, and you need a support system and a network system in order for that to help. For example, as the director of rehab, I would be in my office. I'm the only one in my office. On the door, it says Nardia Aldridge, Director of Rehab. I would have people come up to me at my office and say, "Are you Nardia Aldridge's secretary?" Now, to me, that's not it. That's them telling me, well, there's no way you could be the director of rehab because you're Black, right? That's what the message that's coming across to me as. Now, I may say that to someone who may not understand, and they would think, oh, you're overreacting, it's not a big deal. But when that happens quite often, it is a big deal. Or they'll come, they will look at my name, look in the office, see me, go back out into the clinic and ask my white counterpart if they're Nardia Aldridge. Okay, so you're gonna get that. I've had patients refuse to get therapy from me because I'm Black, because of the color of my skin. And you may get it based on your gender, you may get it based on your religion, you never know. So, and so you're getting it from both ends. You're getting from the clients, and you're getting from, not your employer per se, but people who work there. In terms of employer, one way I've seen it come across as meetings. Sometimes I would go to a meeting and I would meet with physicians, because part of as the director of rehab, right, we were collaborating with different hospitals in the area, and I would go to meetings, and because I was a Black female, I was asked to bring my white counterpart with me. Even though they were my assistant, they were below me, but I was asked to bring that person to the meeting, and they spoke to that person instead of to me directly. So think about how you're feeling constantly with that. So those are just some example with that, and it's hard. It's a difficult pill to swallow, and this is why I am part of the National Black Occupational Therapy Caucus, because that provides the network and support that I need. And then I was president for the chapter in New York when I was there. And then when I relocated here to Florida and I realized they didn't have one, I started a chapter in Florida. So I'm president and the founder for the South Florida Black Occupational Therapy Caucus as well, because I needed a place where I could go and share my stories and get ideas as to how to cope with them or what to do with them, and know that I was supported and that people are not going to say you're overreacting, it's not a big deal, or you're making a big deal of it. But so the little things, the implicit biases are difficult. Like, you're smart for a Black girl. How many times have I heard that? You're pretty for a Black girl. What does that mean, right? And I'm sure many of you may have other examples depending on your religion or your culture, different things that may come up. And those are that implicit bias. Or, a common one that we think nothing of all the time is, well, where are you from? No, where are you really from? So what's your objective in asking that? So if you ask me where I'm from, I say, well, I'm from New York, or from there. And then if you ask me where are you really from? It depends on what's your objective. If you're just trying to make a connection with me and say, well, I hear an accent, and I'm from the islands or whatever, then that's different. But if you're just gonna say, because I look a certain way, I can't be American, right? Then there's an implicit bias there. And I always tell people, if you say to someone that I don't see color, I don't see race, that within itself is an issue, because if you don't see color, then you don't see me. You don't see my struggle. You don't see what I experience on a day-to-day basis as a Black woman. So even though to the individual saying it, they don't mean anything by it, but it's an invalidation. It's called micro-invalidation. It's invalidating who I am as a Black woman. So those ones are harder to pinpoint sometimes. And that's going to be harder for you to fight maybe in the workplace. But when it's straight out discrimination, such as something with your hair, as I mentioned, I just did a study with my students, and in interviewing students and new practitioners in the field, some said if they had their hair a certain way, they were judged, or they were told at work they couldn't wear their hair that way, right? And my suggestion to them is to tell them to show you in the employee handbook or the contract that you signed that said what your hairstyle should be. And if they're able to, if it's just to be off your shoulder, then okay, you wrap it up. But if they don't say anything about dreads or anything in the handbook, then it's not an issue. Then you have a case for discrimination, right? So you have to really look and see what exactly are they speaking to, and being able to pinpoint that. The implicit bias, that's the one that's going to hurt you the most, and that's the one that's going to be a little bit harder for you to fight. But the outright discrimination and things like that, if you go into a workplace and you see something and you're able to address it, then you can. And sometimes you may have to sit back and observe for a little bit, right? And see, is this really a thing, or is it just this one person? And maybe you could speak to that person individually. And sometimes you also think, is it best to speak to this person outside one-to-one, or is it best to speak to them in front of a group where they can't disown it? But this is going to be a judgment call depending on what's going on. I hope that helped and that I didn't go too deep with that. It's one of my passion areas, and I do speak a lot on diversity and inclusion issues.
Yeah, diversity is so important. Thank you for going deep into the topic. It actually gives us so much knowledge. I didn't know a lot of the terms that you've addressed, and it's just absolutely disgusting that people are capable of doing that. But thank you for speaking about that and speaking about your experience. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Timothy asks just a little question to get out from the deep end that we've entered. What can I do as a 9th grader to help or prepare me to become a physical therapist, just helping with injuries?
Okay. Well, Timothy, once it's great having you on the platform as a 9th grader. Did you say 9th grader or 9th? Yes?
He's a 9th grader, yes.
9th grader, great. And 2, why are you asking me about physical therapy? I'm here about occupational therapy. No, but no, if you're interested in physical therapy is a great profession as well. And I do love all my physical therapy counterparts that I've worked with. But in school, of course, all your biology and all your science courses will come into play. And then when you go into college, then you're going to look into, and it doesn't have to be physical therapy, but that would be the better route to go in terms of having more things open to you. But they also have, exercise physiology? They have some college programs may have that where you're able to study specifically for those sports, or they have sports injury, right? So some programs, they may be titled sports injury, they may be titled exercise physiology, and what is it, athletic? There's another one, and it's like Nova, and the title is slipping me. But I think as long as you, the difference between physical therapy and occupational therapy in terms of the coursework is physical therapy does a lot more in terms of the sciences and, you know, the biology and the kinesiology and all of those things. So whereas occupational therapy may only take 1 semester of kinesiology or something, because like I said, we're more focused on the mental health, the cognition and the occupations. The physical therapist is more functional, worry about your muscle, your strength, your balance, and all of those things. And even though we are concerned about it as well, it's not our primary focus. So my advice to you, Tim, is to stay in school, get grit, do very well as the best you can in your coursework in high school. And when you're selecting your college, look at what they have in terms of, do they have the physical therapy, but also see if they have those other programs. Do they have exercise physiology? Do they have athletic trainer thing? Do they have an athletic trainer program? Do they have any of those sports medicine type? This way, you could learn a little bit more about each of them and be sure as to exactly what you want to do. And then the other thing is now, even as a student, if you have the opportunity in high school to shadow, go for it. See if you're able to find a physical therapist who's working with injuries and ask them, reach out to them. Hi, I'm interested in this profession. Is it okay for me to come shadow you? Even if it's just 1 hour per week, just to come and to see what you do and get some more information and ideas. And I think that would get you on the right track. So I hope I was able to give you some valuable information there, Timothy, and good luck with your education.
Thank you for that. Although you have a great profession that just changes everyone's lives, Khadija would like to know if you can pick out some few moments from all the moments you've had that are rewarding in occupational therapy.
Oh my goodness, there's so many, yes, but I think, well, you know, I mentioned about having someone in a coma, right? Having someone who was in a motor vehicle accident, who's comatose for 6 months. And then you've worked with them and then they wake up and then you're able to continue providing the therapy to them, get them to be able to do something as simple as being able to wipe their face, because before they were comatose, but now you have to get them strength back in their hands to be able to wipe their face, to brush their teeth, to comb their hair, to then being able to leave and go home. That is very rewarding for me, to have an elderly person who fell and broke their hip and then now being able to get dressed on their own, because you know I was able to teach them how to use adaptive equipment to get dressed without breaking their precautions and still be able to get dressed, or to use one-handed technique to do something. That is very rewarding. And then even for me now, I am no longer in the clinic, because when I came to Florida, I switched from the clinic into academia. So now I am a professor at Nova Southeastern University, right? And now my greatest pleasure is seeing my students graduate and become occupational therapists, right? And that gives me great joy. So there are just so many different examples, but you know, it goes, and then my students, when they reach out to me and tell me, I said, you know, they're doing so great, whether it's at their fieldwork or at their first job, and knowing that I was able to positively impact their lives, or my patients writing me a letter after they have left and saying how happy they are and how, you know, they have gained hope and all the different things, amazing things they're able to do between them and their family. Then those moments are like, yes, thank you. Victory moments. Yes, thank you for that question.
It's interesting to see how your rewarding moments go from patients to students, just so flexible and nice. It's awesome. I'm so glad you have that. Mariah wants to know, what is the difference between an OT who works in the hospital versus an OT who works in the clinic? She is asking specifically for patient interactions, but also interactions with other professions such as physical therapy or other health professionals.
Okay, thank you for that question. So in the hospital, the occupational therapist, number one, the team is different. You have a bigger team than if you was in an outpatient clinic. In an outpatient clinic, you may have maybe one other occupational therapist and a physical therapist or a couple other physical therapists, but you are not going to necessarily see the doctor there. You are not necessarily going to see the nurse in an outpatient clinic, and those individuals will be in the hospital. Now, in the hospital, your job as the occupational therapist, your main thing is always mobility. So getting them up and out of bed is goal number one. You're not able to be at your best if you're laying in bed every day. And we all know that. And if you have, and God forbid, if you have had COVID, you know what that meant. It was laying there. If you know someone who had COVID, you're laying there for, you know, hours or days or weeks, and it's difficult. So our first job is mobilization, getting the person up and out of bed, getting them to work on their basic hygiene and skill, getting them, make sure they know how to get dressed and do all of these things. And aside from that, then you have to think, so those are what I call basic self-care tasks or activities of daily living. And then we have what we call instrumental activities of daily living, right? Or IADLs. And in that you're working on them being able to go home and cook and shop and clean and do laundry and drive and all these different things that you're going to help the client get back to. Their leisure, their gardening, all of these things you would do with them in the hospital. And it may be that, you know, they had a stroke and you're working on, as I mentioned, coordination, teaching them one-handed technique, just getting them to be able to do all those things again, no matter their injury. So that's how it may look in the hospital. If you're in an outpatient clinic, they may be coming to you because they need a hand splint, or what we call an orthosis. So you may know it as a splint or a brace, but for us as occupational therapists, it's an orthosis. So they may come in because they cut their hand and they had an injury, and now they can't, get any flexion. They can't make a fist. And then if you can't make a fist or you can't do this, then what me as the occupational therapist think is that if the person can't make a fist, or if they can't open their hand, whichever way, what are some day-to-day things that they would need to do that's going to prevent them from doing, right? That means I can't hold my spoon to feed myself. That means I can't open my hand to pick up my child. That means I can't get dressed because, what's going on? How am I going to zip up my clothes? How am I going to handle my buttons? So this is how an occupational therapist is thinking. We're always thinking, whatever the injury is, what's the limitation on function? How is it affecting them functionally? That's our goal. Function. So in the clinic now, I may work with getting them that orthosis. If they're like this, I'm going to work on getting them a splint where eventually I will be able to open their hands up. And then I'm going to work on different exercises and things so we can get the function back, right? So that would be it. And you may do some of those things in the hospital as well, but there may be a progression to that. Whereas in an outpatient clinic, they may be able to do a lot of the basic stuff for themselves, but now they're having these challenges. Or at work or school, they need to type, but they're having, some carpal tunnel injury, pain, and different things like that. And you as the occupational therapist would work with them on being able to compensate, or you may come up with some adaptive equipment that's going to help them to be more independent at work or at home. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea as well. And for individuals in the clinic, in an outpatient setting, you'll see CHT, that means Certified Hand Therapist. And that could either be a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, but it's an advanced level. So even after you've passed your boards, there's a separate board that you have to take to be a certified hand therapist. And it's very hard. So if you ever get that distinction, kudos to you, but you have to know a lot about that hand and everything, every muscle, every nerve, all of those things, which does not penetrate my brain. My brain is not built for knowing those things. But if you're interested in that, if you're very into the anatomy of the body and those things, then a certified hand therapist would be a perfect place for you.
Despite that, I think that I can understand why you guys have to take so many anatomy courses, because constantly application to anatomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have to take anatomy before you come into the program, as well as while you're in the program. So yes, it's definitely a big thing. And it is one of the areas where our students struggle the most. That comes in is that anatomy and physiology. So work hard on those classes.
Thank you. So Jonas has a question. What is the difference between someone with a doctorate compared with someone who has a master's in OT? And he's specifically asking on the scope of practice. So what can someone with a doctorate in OT do that someone with a master's in OT can't?
Okay. Great question. Now, when you talk about the doctorate in OT, you have to think about, is it that entry-level doctorate? Remember, I told you that you could either have a master's degree or an entry-level doctorate. For both of those, typically pay, experience, everything is the same because it's the same education, except there's an additional research that they may have. The doctorate, that entry-level doctorate person may have a little bit more in terms of that research. The other plus that I've seen with that is that people feel that it gives them a seat at the table, figuratively speaking, because when you're on a team, imagine you're going around walking and everyone else is introducing themselves as Dr. So-and-so, and then you're like, well, I'm the occupational therapist. But being able to say, I am also Dr. So-and-so and occupational therapist, then it makes a difference. As for some people, it gives them the ability to have a seat at the table. The other distinction I also believe that it does allow for some people is, so not only just team meetings, but also sometimes people want to become entrepreneurs and things like that, and they're thinking that will help them along that line. But in terms of the actual practice and what they're doing, that doesn't change. PhD or post-professional doctorate, that's the difference. So for someone with an entry-level doctorate, them and the person with the master's degree, that's going to be pretty much the same for the most part. The difference is the post-professional doctorate or the PhD. With a PhD, well, one, teaching is one of the benefits, right? But you're able to teach in any university that's a research university. You could still teach with your master's, because I was doing that. I could teach master's students and anyone below a master's student with my master's degree. But now with my PhD, I could teach PhD and anyone below that, whereas before I wasn't able to teach that. So now I could teach students who are PhD students or post-professional doctorate students. That's one of the benefits. And of course, in terms of if I was in the clinic, it may or may not have made a big difference in my salary if I was in practicing, because once you're practicing, they're going to look more on your experience, right? What experience do you have in a certain thing? So someone with a master's degree who has been working, I'm going to say, with neuro clients, with clients who have Parkinson's or strokes or anything like that. They have been working with those clients for 15 years. And then here I come with my PhD and I'm brand new. I'm not going to get the same salary as that person because I have a PhD. They have the experience, even though they have a lesser degree, they have the experience and they will get more than I. But sometimes we know it's politics. Politics does play a large role. And you will be surprised that some people may give that person with it. But when you think overall, it's not. It does make a difference in terms of your education, in terms of what you're doing with it. Like I said, if I wanted academia, currently I would like to open my own adult day service center. That's my current thing that I'm working on, being able to have my own adult daycare center. And it does help for me to be able to speak to the Department of Health or to speak to different people and say, hi, I'm Dr. Aldridge and I'm looking to do so and so. It gives me a little, a little bit better. But what I will tell you is that, and I mentioned it earlier, that, males are only 9% in our profession. I guarantee you that male therapist is still going to make more than that female therapist. And research has shown that, and we have it in our data that for whatever reason it is, that the male therapist is still getting paid more. But I will tell you, for you females on here, it's because you are not negotiating. A lot of times female get told a salary and they're like, okay, that's good, thank you. Or they feel bad to ask for more. That male will ask for more even when they're less experienced or they don't even know the job. They will say yes to the job, learn the job while they're doing it and still get paid more than the female that is able to do the job. So it just, sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's not. You just have to know where you are and where you're going and what's your ultimate goal. What do you want to do at the end of the day? So if you're debating, should I get that entry-level doctorate or should I get that master's degree? One, look at cost, because that's, for students, that's the big thing. How much is this going to cost me? You don't want to be that person who leaves school with $300,000 debt and only making, X amount per year. So you want to be mindful of that. How much is this degree going to cost me and how long? How much time do I have to put into it? Will 29 months be okay for me? 2.5 years, am I okay with that? Or am I okay with going to school for 3.5 years and having that doctorate, right? And then after you have that, what do you want to do after that? So you have to really think, what's your game plan? What's the end goal for you? What do you want at the end? Do you want to eventually teach? Or are you okay with just working in a hospital as an occupational therapist? And as I said, remember, my occupational therapy degree is a bachelor's degree. When I went for my master's, I didn't get another master's in occupational therapy. I got a specialty. I got a master's in gerontology. So now I went from being a general occupational therapy practitioner to specifying with a geriatric population, right? And then for my PhD, I didn't get a PhD in occupational therapy. I got a PhD in healthcare administration because I knew my ultimate goal was to open an adult daycare center. So by getting healthcare administration, I now open more doors to me and my abilities rather than keeping myself bottled into one degree. So just think about all these different things as you go forward, but in terms of your skills and what you will do as an occupational therapist, it's not going to make a difference whether you have that entry-level doctorate or if you have that master's degree. What's going to matter is later on down the line. 5-10 years later, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself? And if you're thinking, I want to open my own business, I want to do these things, then maybe the doctorate is better, because you're going to think, if I could introduce myself as Dr. So-and-so to this team, it's more likely that they will listen to me, right? Than if I'm only introducing myself as the occupational therapist.
Thank you for that awesome answer. We've had a couple of students asking the same question, so I decided to just ask it. They're talking about research in occupational therapy. Can you kind of describe what it's like to do research in occupational therapy? Do they do research with patients, or what is it like?
Okay, it depends. The great thing about occupational therapy, as I mentioned, is occupations is anything that people do or involved with. As I mentioned, right now, my research is on systemic racism. But I look at how does it affect Black occupational therapy students and Black occupational therapy practitioners. We have individuals doing research on different instruments or tools to be able to use. So you could have research on that. We have individuals doing research on different assessments to assess children abilities and skills. So your research could be on an assessment. Your research could be on about teaching, anything you could think of, whatever your area of interest is. I've done research on interdisciplinary collaboration. I've looked at research as to how do OT and PT students collaborate, and what does that look like while they're in school, and then 3 years later after they've graduated, right? What is that collaboration like? Are PT and OT having a good relationship in the clinic, and how did their education impact them? So you could go anywhere with your research topic. It doesn't mean, and no, we're not, when you mentioned, is it on patients and stuff like that? If you're going through the process to get approval to do research on a patient is a long process, because they're considered vulnerable population. So children, the elderly, anyone in the prison system, the homeless, all these people are considered vulnerable population. So you have to be careful with who you're interviewing and how you go about that. But the things that you would look at, let's say I was looking at an elderly client, what would be my objective? What do I need? What do I want to know? Maybe currently with COVID, I want to know of all the patients who are between age 60 and 80 who got diagnosed with COVID, did their cognition change, right? And did their cognition change after 6 months of having COVID versus 2 years? So all these, there's gonna be a lot of research coming out about COVID, right? So you want to be able to look and be able to have something to look. And then what does that mean for you as the occupational therapist or your profession? Whatever my findings are going to be, how is that going to change anything? You know, so I mentioned my research on systemic racism. My goal is that I've already done the research. I have the data. I just have to analyze it, and my students and I to present it. But now that I have this, and I realize that there's a problem that students are not being taught in their programs about systemic racism and how to handle it. No one had told them, if you have a client refuse you because of your color, religion, whatever, what do you do? No one has had that conversation with them. What can we do? So my goal is to be able to impact my profession by telling our accrediting board, as well as the American Occupational Therapy Association, that you need to put some mandatory things and requirements in place that it is addressed within the OT curriculum. This way, we're better prepared. We're sending out prepared students and practitioners out into the world in dealing with systemic racism and how to address issues in their workplace or even in the classroom. When you are 1 in 30 students, you're the only Black student out of 30, it's a struggle. And sometimes professors are not thinking about that. Sometimes the program directors are not thinking about that. And they may wonder, why is that student struggling? Or why doesn't that student do well? Well, because I'm the only Black student in a class of 26. How do you expect me to grow? I have no one to feel connected with. I feel isolation, or I feel I have to represent the whole culture. That burden is on me. I feel that I have to be the go-to person for diversity. So I think you have to really, really think about what do you want to do with that research and go with it. But you could research anything, because as I already told you, every and anything is occupational therapy. So if you keep that in your mind, whatever topic of interest is to you, research it. For my PhD, I research adult daycare centers. and I researched which program is best. Is the medical model best or the social model? You know, I looked at things like that because I knew this is something I wanted to do in the end. I wanted to open an adult day service center. So it would make sense that my research for my PhD would be about that, right? So always think, what's your end goal? You have to have a goal and then be able to work towards that. And once you have that goal, you take those small steps to get there.
Thank you for that answer. Just once
You're
again,
welcome.
just beautiful answers coming out of you. Thank you. We have another question regarding location. So this is like a two-way question.
Mhm.
So the person is asking, our location within the country, is it different in certain areas of the country, like in the South, is occupational different than the North? And the second question she's asking is, why did you want to come to Florida for occupational therapy? Like, what was the reason? If it was a personal reason, or just did you feel that Florida had more opportunities or something like that?
Okay. All right, well, great question. So first I'll do the moving to Florida part because that part is the easy part. Moving to Florida was a personal decision, and it was that getting older. As much as I don't like to admit it, the age, you know, you're aging and you wanted to, so I think better quality of life. Florida versus New York, it's better quality of life you're getting. And it has proven itself. You know, we've been here for 5 years now, and we do realize we have more time as a family. I don't feel like I'm constantly on the go. I do have time to be able to sit and, you know, relax a little and enjoy some life. Not only that, it's closer to Jamaica than New York is. It's a shorter flight for me. And when I'm here in Florida, I do feel as if I'm back in Jamaica. You know, certain parts of it that I go to, I do feel more at home. So that's my reason for moving. It wasn't for more opportunities, because what I will tell you is New York, better pay for occupational therapists. You had higher salary there and definitely more opportunities as the places to work. Florida is very saturated with occupational therapists. So the work is here, but it is hard to find, especially in South Florida. I do believe if you're more North or Central Florida, then it may be easier to find a job. But South Florida is very concentrated with occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants. So that's the reason in terms of the moving. Yeah, it was an opportunity, and my salary got cut in half. Moving from New York for Florida for one, that was one cut. And then moving from the clinic, from being a therapist in a skilled nursing facility, a director of rehab, to starting out brand new in academia. So I started back from scratch, basically. So I said, but I wanted to impact on a different level. I wanted to impact future therapists. So I took that opportunity. So that's the part in terms of the personal moves. In terms of occupational therapy, depending on where you go, in different states, your scope of practice stays the same. The different things that you may be allowed to do may be different. For example, we have what we call PAMS, or physical agent modality. If you're getting a hot pack or a e-stem or ultrasound, if you're using those things as part of your therapy, each state has their own requirements. So I mentioned that you never have to do the board exam again, but you have to get a license in that state, right? And each state has their own scope of practice. What are some things you may be allowed to do or not allowed to do? For example, supervision of occupational therapy assistants. Some state may say one occupational therapist could supervise 4 occupational therapy assistants, where another state may say you're allowed to supervise 5 occupational therapy assistants. So little things like that may be different. What you're doing as the occupational therapist and the essence of who you are as an occupational therapist, that doesn't change. Some of the little things may be different. So think of if you're working somewhere where there's a lot of farmland, right? And the type of work the people there need to do, your therapy that you're going to give may be different from if you was working in the city, and the type of work that those individuals would want to do, because their occupations are going to be impacted differently. So how you do your therapy may be different, but the basic principles are the same. Your education doesn't need to be changed, none of that. But what your resources are and how you go about doing it may be different depending on where you are. But the state, it's not going to matter in terms of your actual skills and stuff. You may need to get a little creative But in essence, you as an occupational therapist and your basic scope of practice, that will stay the same. But in every state, you need to look up what the scope of practice is. And that's usually based on the state association. So I mentioned the Occupational Therapy Association, but each state has their own. For example, there's the New York State Occupational Therapy Association. And then here in Florida, we have the Florida Occupational Therapy Association. So I would go to their website and I always look on the licensure or scope of practice and see what they're saying, what they may say I'm limited to or not limited to. But yeah, your basic skills stay the same. And that's the great thing. You could go, I could leave. And what I love about my profession is I could decide that I no longer want to work with adults and I want to work with children. And I could stop working with adults today and get a job tomorrow in a school without anything. And the difference is you would have to know based on your skill set. I wouldn't do it because, like I said, me and those children are not going to make it. But I love my older folks. But if I wanted to, I could. And what it would mean for me personally is, one, as an individual, I need to know my capabilities and my abilities. And two, maybe I want to take some continuing education course or watch some videos just to brush up on my skills, or pull out my pediatric books, right? And read through those again and be able to go, but I wouldn't need to get a new license or a different license. I wouldn't need to go to school again. I could just switch anywhere on the continuum of care. I could go from the hospital to the outpatient clinic to a skilled nursing facility. I could do any of that as an occupational therapist at any point that I decide. And you will find that some people work with children in the school system during the daytime. And if they don't have family or they're still very new and not married, committed yet, and then they would work in the evenings in a skilled nursing facility or something, so you could do 2 full-time jobs if you wanted to. If you're trying to, get something or achieve something, you have people that do that all the time. So I like that you don't have an opportunity to get bored as an occupational therapist, because you could do many things. I have a friend of mine that works for BMW, just making sure that the car seat and the hand controls, that all of those are ergonomically good for someone. And I'm like, what? And so that's his job as an occupational therapist, is working with a car dealership to make sure that everything is set up, is good. This way you're not having shoulder and neck pains. That's what he does. So you don't have an opportunity to be bored. You could do anything, anywhere.
It's really nice how it's so flexible, because some people have very kind of interests that are very narrow, and they can get their little interests in the way, because it's such a huge profession. Thank you for that question. Before we ask our last question, I just want to release a poll and see what kind of students we have. So for our students, I'm asking everyone to kind of answer our poll. The first question is, where are you from? And the second question is, what level of training are you currently at? Just have 15 more seconds. Awesome. So it looks like most of us are from Southeast continental US and Western US. And most of our students are actually high school students, which is interesting. We usually just get undergrad students, but we do have a lot of college freshmen, sophomore, junior, and senior levels. Some of us are even post-baccalaureate.
Oh, wow. This is amazing. Nice. I love it. I did, for my interviews that I was in, I did meet 2 students that were from Alaska, which was great. They were doing their occupational therapy program in Alaska. And I was like, oh, amazing is that? That's where they were going to school. So they do have a school there if you want to.
Nice. So for our last question, did you have any advice for our students, just any last advice for our future OT students?
My advice is, whatever I kept harping on your goals, know your goal, whatever it is. And even if you're not clear, write it down. Write whatever that goal is, write it down, and then write down the small steps that you need to get there, because sometimes we think big picture only and we don't think about the small steps. Because I love to say, let's celebrate those small victories. So even it was like apply to X amount of school. Apply. And then when you send in that application, celebrate yourself for being able to get that small milestone down and be able to do that. So know your goal, know what you want to do. Also, don't let finances be the reason why you don't achieve your goal. I believe a lot of people and a lot of minorities, they're constantly thinking, oh my God, it's going to cost so much money. And for myself, I know personally, I'm still paying for my master's degree and now my PhD, by the way, but I know where I am happy with it. And I move on because I knew my goal, not only for my adult day service center, but I wanted to teach my children that it is possible to get a PhD. It is possible for a Black woman in your family, you know, to be able to have this. My mom and my dad, they didn't even graduate high school. They have a middle school education. So I am first generation high school, first generation college, first generation PhD. So don't let the finances be the reason. Yes, there are grants and scholarships. You may have to dig hard for it. But even if that doesn't happen, and God forbid you do have to get those student loans, and hopefully it wouldn't be that case. Hopefully our policies are changing and we wouldn't have that. But focus on those dreams, focus on those goals, write them down, write the small steps, and don't let the finance keep you away. And I see that someone asked for my contact information. Yes, I will be more than happy to share my information with you. Feel free to reach out to me if you should have any additional questions that I may be able to assist you with that. And just keep going, and we need you. We need more of you out there. So just keep going. And even if it's not occupational therapy, that's where I want you to be, because I've seen great things. I've been doing this for over 18 years now, and I do love it, and I'm still doing it, as you can see. But whatever it is, just go for it. Just keep going. Thank you.
Thank you for such a beautiful presentation and just beautiful answers. Thank you so much again. We really loved your time with us, and I know our students appreciated your amazing insight. Really nice.
Yeah. And I'll share it in here. And you will you be sending the student like an email with information?
Definitely.
How does it work?
If you can type your information in the chat, we'll definitely send it to them.
Okay, so I did that. It's naldridge@nova.edu, and you could just reach me there. And do I need to, well, you have my PowerPoint if you need to send it out as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If you guys need the PowerPoint, you can email us at info@prehealthshadowing.com and we'll send it out to you if you'd like.
It was a pleasure being here with you all this evening. I hope you found the session to be beneficial.
Thank you. We did. Thank you so much.
And feel free to let me know if you have any, anything else that you would like information on, or if there's any other discipline that I can introduce you to or so.
It would be our pleasure. Thank you. So thank you again for that informative presentation. It was just so awesome listening to you speak. Considering this, we would like to encourage everyone to reflect on the session today. So some questions we'd encourage you to ask yourself is what brought you to the session today? What are 3 major takeaways you got? You may include more because this was such an awesome session. You might have like 10 major takeaways, but write any notes that you like down. And what do you want to learn more about after this session? This writing reflection isn't required. However, we do encourage you to write because just for documentation purposes, so you don't forget your thoughts and feelings during the speaker's presentation, and maybe you can use the information to enhance your future applications. In case you wanted to publish your reflection, you can definitely go on to www.prehealthshadowing.com/blogs submissions and submit your articles, reviews, reflections, and success stories. A lot of these topics are on health science, medicine, sociology, and just being a student in the health field. So if you guys have any insight and would like to get published, you can definitely submit your work. And since I'm the editor-in-chief, I look forward to reading your work. So once again, we have some opportunities for you to become more involved in pre-health shadowing. You can get involved in our program to become an asynchronous volunteer or a team member through these links that are sent in the chat. We are also accepting team member applications as well with volunteering. So if you'd like to take on a more active role in PHS to lead projects, initiatives, and be up here with us, definitely fill in the team member application forms. But other than that, we also have the asynchronous volunteer opportunity open to everyone who doesn't have that much of a flexible schedule. Once again, we are humbly asking that if you're financially able to donate a few dollars to us via Venmo or PayPal. It does cost a lot to keep our program running, and we do have some future projects that would need funding. So if you guys know anyone who can support, or if you'd like to support by donating, please consider donating to the links in the chat below. Our organization is a nonprofit, and we'd like to keep it free, so please consider donating to pre-health shadowing. So now for the part everyone's been waiting for, how to get your virtual shadowing hours from this session today. So first, you will go onto our website, prehealthshadowing.com, and find our professionals course pages. Today's speaker was Dr. Nardia Aldridge. So after you find her page, you can take our quick 10-question multiple choice quiz based on the content from the session today. You will have 30 minutes per attempt. Once you open the quiz, you will have 30 minutes to get a 70% or higher. And after you get a 70%, you're able to download your certificate. We do allow 2 attempts per speaker to take the assessment. If you run into any difficulties, please contact us at info@prehealthshadowing.com. Otherwise, we want to make sure that you know that our quizzes are open indefinitely. So you are able to take the quiz today or tomorrow or next week or next month. But once you open it, you have 30 minutes to take it and 2 attempts to take it. Once you have passed, you can click the Finish Course button at the bottom of the professionals page, and you are able to download your certificate, which is verifying your virtual shadowing hours. If you missed a part of the session or want to go back and view other sessions that we've had at Pre-Health Shadowing in the past to earn more certificates with verified virtual shadowing hours, you can go onto our YouTube channel and watch our previous recordings and this recording, which will be uploaded later, at our YouTube channel at Pre-Health Shadowing. You can also find them via the professional pages on our website, and you are able to take any you are able to take any session and take any assessments on it as you please if you find them interesting. So go ahead and check out our YouTube channel and the previous sessions on our website. Be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list so you know when the latest sessions are coming up and any events that we have. We are currently booked every weekday until June for virtual shadowing sessions. So I hope to see you guys there, and be sure to keep up to date with our future sessions and events. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please stick around if you have any questions. Myself and my other team members will be happy to answer them for you. This shadowing session is officially over, and I invite everyone to log off and have a great night.